With elections on the horizon, Portugal is in full political campaign mode, and along with the political campaign, there are political debates between the candidates. Since in Portugal we elect parties, the debates are between the leaders of the parties up for election. If you follow this channel, you already know my opinion. I want change. I want this corrupt and criminal regime created by liberals, socialists and communists to disappear, because for 47 years they had power and all they've accomplished was to impoverish the Portuguese people, increase taxes and get themselves richer at the expense of the Portuguese taxpayer. The Socialists are the party where most of the fault lies in regards to the way this regime works, because they were in power for more than 30 years out of the 47 that Portugal is supposedly a constitutional republic with democratic principles. In my previous video and in many others in the past, I already showed you how Portugal is not really a constitutional republic with democratic principles, because laws are created based on a ruling ideology and not based on the majority of votes, plus even those laws are not followed by the Portuguese elites, and those elites include the political class. And today I'm going to remind you of what this political elite says and what they actually do. Recently, the leader of the CHEGA party, André Ventura, and the leader of the Socialist Party and current Prime Minister António Costa participated on a debate. During that debate, António Costa said the following after André Ventura talked about corruption.
Perto do final do debate.
Para mim não há filhos e enteados.
Não há?
E ninguém está acima da lei. Seja socialista ou não seja socialista. Qualquer socialista que viola a lei tem que ser responsabilizado e é uma vergonha para o Partido Socialista.
Is this really true? Or is this yet another example of snake oil from António Costa? Let's fact check him. When António Costa formed his government in 2015 after losing elections and taking power from a democratically elected government due to deals with the far left, one of the members of that government was César Vieira, a personal friend of António Costa. He was named Adjunct Minister of Economy. Yes, this exists in Portugal, and by creating ridiculous, worthless and redundant positions, the socialists make sure they create jobs for their friends. And in that context, I think it's important to point out that António Costa's government is the largest ever since 1974. However, César Vieira is not known for his competency or extraordinary work as an adjunct minister of economy, whatever that position entails. He is actually known because the day before he assumed this position in António Costa's government, he opened a company of which he was the manager. According to Portuguese law, this is illegal and the consequence should be the immediate firing from government of César Vieira. But António Costa, of course, did not fire his friend. In fact, the clown world that is Portugal came to the rescue of César Vieira in the form of the Constitutional Court that was supposed to formalize the need for César Vieira to be fired. However, the Constitutional Court said that they believed César Vieira when he said he didn't know he was breaking a law, and so they would not formalize the firing of César Vieira. Let me assure you that in Portugal, if you break any law, say that you did not know you were breaking a law, and you are not a personal friend of the Socialist Prime Minister, you will suffer all the consequences for breaking that law. But being the personal friend of António Costa was great for César Vieira because he not only did not get fired, he was actually promoted to full-blown Minister of Economy later on. And going back to what António Costa said during his debate with André Ventura, that no one is above the law, socialist or not, fact check false. If you are a socialist or a friend of a socialist, especially the Prime Minister, then yes, you are above the law in Portugal. But there's more. A couple of years ago I made a video about how Portugal was definitely a dictatorship because everything that happens in a dictatorship was happening in Portugal, namely the fact that the laws that exist do not need to be followed by the elites and in particular by the political class. The law in question was the law that prevents politicians in government from having their family members doing business with the Portuguese state. A fairly common sense law when you consider the existence of huge conflicts of interest when someone in government has a family member doing business with the Portuguese state, which is represented by the government. António Costa's government is the largest ever and is also the one with more family members in it. Wives, husbands, sons, daughters, etc. are all part of António Costa's government, and you can check that in my older videos about this subject. But the socialists weren't satisfied. They also wanted their family members doing business with the state. and thus contracts were made between the company of the son of the Secretary of State of Civil Protection and the Portuguese state. Because scrutiny and transparency do not exist in Portugal, especially for the left, the socialists did not expect much fuss about them breaking another law. But in fact there was some fuss about this one, and António Costa and members of his government made some comments about it. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Augusto Santos Silva, said that it would be ridiculous to do a strict interpretation of the law that prevented family members of the government to do business with the state. Something quite ridiculous to say, since that's exactly how laws are supposed to be interpreted. If you break a law and you are caught, you should suffer the consequences for breaking that law. If you do not have a strict interpretation of the law, then you do not have the same consequences applied every time, and the law and the consequences for breaking it become worthless. But that's exactly what the socialists want. They want laws to be subjective when they are applied to them, but absolutely strict when applied to others. António Costa went a step beyond in his comments. He said that he was going to request an analysis of the law to the state's attorney's office to see if any consequence should be given to those members of government that had family members doing business with the Portuguese state. He also said that whatever the state's attorney's office says, he's not going to follow the law. And there you have it. The Prime Minister of Portugal said to everyone that wanted to hear him that he was not going to follow a law of the country. A law that his government is breaking and that António Costa will make sure has no consequence for his government. Exactly what happens in a dictatorship where laws do not affect the dictators and their friends and family. Going back to what António Costa said during his debate with André Ventura, that no one is above the law, socialist or not, fact check false. If you are a socialist member of the government and have a family member doing business with the Portuguese state, then yes, you are above the law in Portugal. When the analysis of the state's attorney's office was published, it essentially agreed that there should be no consequence to the government for breaking that law. Something not surprising, since the state's attorney's office was now run by Lucília Gago, a socialist appointee to that office. But this case did not end here, because the socialists simply changed the law to allow their family members to do business with the Portuguese state. Another practice in dictatorships is to change the laws that do not serve the interests of the dictator, so that those laws in fact start benefiting the dictators. But there's more. When the socialist Paulo Pedroso was arrested due to the Casa Pia case, a huge pedophilia case in Portugal that involved several elite characters and politicians, António Costa was caught in phone calls trying to interfere with the judicial process and prevent Paulo Pedroso from being arrested. As a reminder, Paulo Pedroso was removed from the Casa Pia process and faced no consequences, despite being accused by the witnesses of that case. And to be clear, the same witness that accused Carlos Cruz, a famous TV presenter also involved in this case, also accused Paulo Pedroso. However, when accusing Carlos Cruz, that witness was considered credible, and Carlos Cruz was convicted. But when accusing Paulo Pedroso, that witness was told to shut up because Paulo Pedroso had been removed from the case due to political pressure from the Socialist Party. Going back to what António Costa said during his debate with André Ventura, that no one is above the law, socialist or not, fact check false. If you are a socialist and you are accused of pedophilia, then yes, you are above the law in Portugal. And for those wondering, Paulo Pedroso is very much still in politics. He was the husband of Ana Catarina Mendes, the parliamentary leader of the Socialist Party, and he was also coordinating the candidacy of Ana Gomes for the presidency. There are many more examples of socialists being above the law, and this video would be infinite if I named them all. But I think this is enough to show you the lying scum that António Costa is. Not to mention the criminal scum he is, and for more information about that, please have a look at my video about António Costa's policies that cost the lives of more than 120 people in the fires of 2017. Let's do ourselves a favor and remove this criminal, liar and corrupt politician named António Costa from government, and give power to those that want to change Portugal's miserable state of affairs to something better. I hope you like this, and I'll see you next time.